Welcome to The Swing of Things with Amanda Kraus. I'm Tom Ransley, and I'm guest host for this episode. I'm the deputy editor of Row 360, the independent global rowing magazine, and before that, I lived my life on the water, rowing for Team GB. In this episode, I'm joined by Fred Schoch, executive director of the Head of the Charles. Prior to the last year's COVID cancellation, the race had only been cancelled once before, due to the 100 Years Storm. The regatta is back for 2021, but not without its challenges. I had the pleasure of hearing the inside line on the past year and a half, as well as Fred's highs and lows running the regatta over the previous 30. So without further ado, let me introduce Fred Schoch.
Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join the podcast. This is the final, 19 days. As my assistant, Nathan, we have social media that puts reminders up for the community, and this is the home stretch. So my staff is working very furiously, like bailing water out of a leaky boat at this point. That's a bad metaphor for a regatta, but it's all going to be tarred and ready to go and sail smoothly here in another week's time. I think the tents go up in another 4 or 5 days.
This year you're doing the extra day, is that right? The Friday?
Yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer. We've got 2 hours planned on Friday morning. It definitely threw alarm bells into some of the state officials when we announced that we were having a third day. But it's been a goal of my chairman, Blair Crawford's, and mine to gradually test the waters with increased because it adds capacity, it adds excitement, it adds value for the sponsors. And, look at Henley. What are they going to 6 days next year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, we have the senior veteran and veteran sculls on Friday morning from 8 to 10, probably stopping around 10:30. And then a last-minute change, our para events will be on Friday morning as the concluding event for Friday. So then practice we'll release boats from the practice area to go in the downstream travel lane to the starting line probably before the races are finished. And then, if you've ever been to the Head of the Charles, it's like, I don't know how to describe it. Everyone wants to get a lap in to sort of have their coxswains, or if you're blind, go over that course one time to sort of remember how severe the angles are on the bridges.
Yeah, I'm very glad I'm not a cox. But yeah, I went down it once, and yeah, it's pretty infamously hard to steer. Weeks Bridge, right? That's one which is pretty hard.
Yeah, Weeks is the halfway point. But there are 7 bridges. And 2 reverse S turns, as we like to say. So, it definitely challenges the best coxswain, and it's a coxswain's race. I mean, I've won the Head of the Charles many times due to the skill of our coxswain in the stern, where we've won by a second or 2, and we know that we nailed the Weeks turn or the Elliott turn.
Yeah.
It's money to have a great coxswain in this race.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons why you, or tell me maybe, this idea of bringing some racing on to Friday, I think was a long time coming. So kind of why now?
I think probably the first reason would be that the youth community is grown so exponentially that as far as accepted entries, they're the least serviced category. Mm-hmm. So in a normal year, not this year because we were able to take more of them because of, unfortunately, the international field not being here. I think Priscilla told me today, who is my assistant, that she took every 8 that entered. That never happens. It never happens. So, next year, as I was starting to say, the percentage of rejection for youth events is probably in the 70-degree area, right, or 70% area.
Yeah.
Because if you take last year's winners, that's half the field, and then you only have 40 spots to hand out to 150 applicants. So it's
Yeah.
It's pretty daunting. So that the youth categories will be happy because we're, now we've added, if you've done your homework, a special medal for under 17 crews in all events this year. So there'll be one medal for the fastest under 17 single, double, director's quad, 4 and 8. But next year, if we get our ducks in a row, we'll have a under 17 8 category by itself.
Okay,
which would be great.
Yeah, and actually, I was going to mention, you did touch on it a little bit, the impact on the international entries with the US travel ban.
Yes.
I guess, it's just from a UK perspective, it's just outside we can come across in November the 1st, so it's really agonizing.
It is.
But so how, I guess to some extent you maybe expected that?
I think certainly our neighbors to the north were hoping that the border would be open to Canada, and we get a lot of entries from Canada. And then that door closed, and then, I'm not up to date on all the travel restrictions. I think people who don't have to quarantine when they go home have still registered. And we do have, actually, I asked Priscilla today because the British Consul General here in Boston wants to attend, and he wanted to know how many British crews there were. And I think there's 5 British scullers.
Wow.
From Vesta, Upper Thames, maybe, a couple more.
Yeah.
And normally, we would have
massive, wouldn't it?
Molesey and, and all the Eatons and, all the boarding school crews love to come over and test their skill on the Charles.
Yeah. Well, it's an absolute bucket list event, isn't it? It's always, it's the name for American regattas.
Well, I think it's a good segue. Why is that? I think it's grown into this fantastic destination because of the quality of the rowing, but the difficulty of the course, and then the warmth of the community here. The Boston is a town that's beloved by most Brits, and people come over here, tourists, by the plane load to shop and visit, and I think the fact that the Head of the Charles has maintained this reputation of being a very well run event with not too many glitches, in timing or weather. We've been lucky with our subcontractors have done the job, and it's a multi-headed monster. There's so many moving parts, and everyone has to do their share. And that, I should have led with our fabulous volunteers.
Yeah.
We've got 1,600 to 1,800 volunteers, without whom there would be no event. It's like, unlike Henley. Henley, they've got a great staff, and they've got many volunteers, but not the numbers that we have.
Yeah. No, I was reading. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 5 full-time staff. Is that right? And then a 15 person board? Yes.
So I have an assistant director, Mason Cox, operations manager, director, Priscilla Livingston, who's moving on actually down to New York with her boyfriend. But then I've hired back, fortunately, Brendan Mulvey, who was our prior operations manager. Then we have a young man who's going to be doing our Regatta broadcast this year, Dan Beckham.
Okay. Yeah.
Who's new to the organization, and longtime CFO Tom Martin, who does even more than CFO chores. He does a lot of work for us. So I think that's 5.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing when you think the marathon here in Boston. I don't know how many employees the London Marathon has, and what sort of tentacles they have in the community in terms of programming, but the Boston Marathon probably has 40 full-time staff here, and a budget of like 20 million. So we're an ant compared to that.
Yeah, but still, I suppose what I was getting at was it's 5 full-time, but then, like you say, the value of the volunteers, and also that they will be. There must be so much communication just to kind of lay it all on in that one period.
Yep. We have two volunteer race directors that oversee a race committee of 15 or 14, and then they oversee an operations race ops group of about 80 to 100. And then they oversee the rest of the volunteers that sign up on the website for the weekend, and probably 50% of those are returning. But my real, value and strength is my board of directors. Again, 15 people, fully committed. Anne Marie Phelps is one of them. We just have really strong people who contribute from a high level and provide that leadership, just like a board of directors of a big business.
Yeah. Let's go on the tentacles, because I like talking about those. You were talking about the Boston Marathon, but for the head of the trials, like the state security you mentioned earlier, like who else are you having to deal with?
All the subcontractors. Well, we have timing subcontractors. We have tent vendors. I shudder to even mention. I think we're spending. Some of these are reimbursable by sponsors, but our tent bill is in the neighborhood of $400,000 US. And it's just sort of astounding.
Yeah, just
right?
building a little mini city.
Yeah, I mean, we are. And for the weekend, it's kind of like building Dorney Lake, right, for the Olympics, and then taking it all down again. Yeah, so subcontractors, we have a public relations firm, government relations, and then we have a longtime employee, Joan Houston, who I brought along when I first started in 1991. I think she came in 92, and she runs all the logistics with Mason Cox, my assistant, of the boat area. So all the boat builders are, and the tents and the retail tents, the Reunion Village where we have a beer garden. Now we have 2 beer gardens because people enjoy a cold drink after their race. So nice. It's a lot of fun, but a lot of sleepless nights the last 30 days.
Hopefully not burdening you too much with sleepless nights, but talk me through the drama of trying to figure out how to cope with obviously the pandemic. And this is, you had to miss last year, but you put on the virtual event at pretty short notice. And, let's start with this year's event, kind of what was the decision process to get to here to hold it?
Sure. Well, I think coming out of the winter, everyone felt like this was going to be a pretty normal year. And then the variant popped its ugly head up. And fortunately, if we have nothing else in Boston, we have a lot. I'm being facetious. We have amazing medical resources here. The hospitals in Boston, research, pharmaceuticals are stacked up. So we teamed up with Mass General Brigham Hospital, their epidemiology specialists, and even they have one person who we interfaced with who is the team doctor for the hockey team, the NHL Bruins here. And so we met bi-monthly. And I said to someone else recently, we had these advisory sessions where we would talk about what ifs, but the variant is dynamic, and COVID was dynamic, and then the state regulations. Some states are requiring vaccinations, and some people are requiring masks indoors and outdoors, and so we really had to put this puzzle down on a board and make sure that all the pieces fit. And I think we're really happy now because the advice we've gotten back, and that's where we've fallen back on, is the medical community. So with their blessing, because the regatta is the quintessential outdoor event where it's natural social distancing with all this geography to spread out, and the fact that crews travel in pods and come together in vans and buses, and their institutions have already mandated policies to protect them, we feel very, very safe about hosting this event. And the rowers will come together, they'll train in a unit on the river, get off, go back to their hotel. So yes, we did require volunteers to be vaccinated because they will be working elbow to elbow doing registration envelopes and all that sort of thing. And there's been no pushback
okay.
on that. So.
Okay, that's good. That's fantastic. Yeah, I suppose, the outdoor aspects and the traveling in pods is something I sort of wouldn't appreciate, but actually, it really makes sense.
It really works. And, as I jokingly said, I think you could have a higher chance of being exposed if you went to the supermarket in Boston. It's just, you don't know who you're running into, whereas these crews are traveling together and, that sort of thing. So, we have a major baseball game here tonight. I'm sure you don't follow it, but there's a team called the New York Yankees and another one called the Boston Red Sox, and they're having a one game playoff tonight to see who advances. And that Fenway Park is going to be jammed with people, and nobody's wearing a mask in there, or people do by choice. It's not mandated.
Okay. When I did do the Head of the Trials in 2016. A couple of our friends, mostly he, Noddy, I'll name them, they managed to get us tickets to the Boston Celtics. That was actually awesome. Getting to see them. I was a big fan of them. And actually...
Well, let me know when you want to go again, because it just so happens that the owner of the Celtics is a rower from Princeton University.
Oh,
yeah. So Wick Grossbeck owns the Celtics, and he was a national lightweight champion at Princeton.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely tap that.
Yeah.
I was trying to make my way there, and I was running late. Of course, the guys were already there, and I sort of bumped into these other people, and we started walking along, and then they got their Google Maps set to walking rather than driving. No, they got the wrong way. It was a driving, but we were walking it. So we literally got onto this massive freeway, and I was like, "Oh, this is not working out." Yeah, that was stressful times. Anyway,
you should have had Mahe take you. Like some of the Kiwis that have been here for generations.
Yeah, exactly. I've always felt a bit hard done by it in the Team GB, because we always sort of had to be nailed back into Caversham straight away, and then you were. Aren't the trials held in Boston, UK? Just to rub salt into the wound.
I think it's the wrong Boston.
I agree. Always jealous seeing Mahe and the like. Let's go dive back in. Maybe a bit about your own personal path through rowing. I understand.
Sure.
Your dad, your father was involved in the sport as well.
He certainly was. That's how I got started. So my father was a Washingtonian and rowed at the University of Washington. He was born and raised in outside of Seattle, and he was recruited to play American football there, but he got injured his first year and went out for rowing, and the rest was history, as they say. So he was fortunate enough to be in that boys in the boat generation, and rowed in the undefeated freshman and sophomore crew with Joe Rance in the Boys in the Boat book, and
amazing, all
of that. And then he was the spare man in Munich when they went to the Olympics. So I was a cross he had to bear his whole life. He was an Olympian with a gold medal crew without the gold medal. Yeah. But it turned out all right for him, because he got recruited to coach at Princeton University soon after he returned. And that's where I was born. So I was born in Princeton and grew up around the boathouse there, and started my career as a coxswain. Be a bit tough now. But yeah, so then I followed in his footsteps, rowed at Washington. One sort of fun fact, my grandfather was a Washingtonian too. He was recruited to Washington to play baseball, and his nickname was Outlaw Shock. And he was this stocky, burly fastball pitcher who was apparently a legend in the West Coast. So he was inducted into the Hall of Fame at the university. My father was inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame. And then finally, I was inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame.
Good,
so
very good.
We got 3 Shocks in the Athletic Hall of Fame at Washington.
Nice. I think it was Washington that went by us when I raced ahead of the trials, like a knife through butter. It was pretty embarrassing. It was inside a minute off of the start line, but less said the better probably. Then you went into some coaching, is that right? You coached national.
I have done some coaching, yeah. So I started my professional life as a secondary school English teacher. So I taught at a very strong rowing school called Kent School, and then another strong rowing school in Boston called Belmont Hill School. And then I pivoted and coached for about a dozen years, the highlights of which were at Princeton. I coached the varsity women at Princeton to a national championship, or what they called a national Ivy League championship, I guess, at the time. I wouldn't call it national. And then I coached at the Naval Academy and Georgetown University, and then national teams in the summertime. So I worked with a lot of the American coaches whose names are probably familiar to listeners on this broadcast. Larry Gluckman, who just passed away, Curtis Jordan, who was our high performance director, 30-year coach at Princeton, sort of puts me in the senior category now. And Chris Korzeniowski, who was a mentor to me when I was coming up coaching, and I coached the women's open team in '89 in Bled. And then I coached the junior team to a gold medal in Germany in '87, and then coached the lightweight straight four in '91. Yeah. So I did have some fun coaching, and then pivoted to event management. And here I am after 30 years of running the Head of the Charles. I think it's probably time for me to find a fly fishing rod or a deep sea charter boat in Florida.
Well, yeah, you definitely seem to be doing a good job of it. So I would
soon enough.
Get that right. Yeah.
Well, the sponsorship, I think I've got a little bit of window or runway left, because the sponsorship solicitation has been sort of my specialty, and even Mike Sweeney and his compatriots have come over to sort of imitate and sort of see how to commercialize the sport a little bit more. And Neil Chagani, how do you pronounce Neil's last name? Chagani, thank you. Neil and of course Matthew Pinsent have come over many times, and Matthew was even gracious enough for our 50th. I don't know, were you here for our 50th?
I came off back 2016.
16, okay.
No, so it'd be the year.
Yeah, I guess it would have been. You just missed it. Matthew gave a rousing poem at our 50th celebratory dinner, which was well received.
Okay, nice. I was reading up, and it says you approach, cold call something like 500 companies a year. Is that right?
I would say that's undercounting. Yeah. It's nonstop. Basically, as soon as the regatta is over, in fact, during the regatta, I have a whole bunch of prospects I'm bringing on site to show around for next year. And then you go into contract renewals with the people that you did have this year. Vineyard Vines and Ford Motor Company this year, and Sierra Nevada Beer, and some of Mass General Hospital, Mass General Brigham. But then we have, people like United States Postal Service and Timberland and, some of the other. Rivian is a new electric truck that's being made in Texas. Amazon, I have a former rower who's working at Amazon in sponsorship now. And so Fred doesn't get much of a break. We put everything away, count the inventory, collect a few bills, and then we're out the door selling again. Because unfortunately, the fourth quarter is when most companies are building their budgets for the next year.
Yeah.
So we want to get in front of them before, much before, too far into this first quarter.
What do you think are some of the biggest changes that you've seen over the 30 years? And also maybe what are the biggest challenges, given that I nearly said that instead? Sure.
Well, obviously 30 years is a lot of opportunity for change. When I first started, I think the cheat sheet that I saw had, I think there was only 300 boats in the first regatta, and we've grown exponentially. Our budget, the number of athletes that we have is now over 11,000. I think when I started, it was, it was mostly scullers, so it was probably there was only a handful of 8s.
228 is what I have here as competitors.
Yeah, well, that's probably correct then.
So that's a massive change.
I mean, I think, because rowing needs, the shells need to be timed uniquely, unlike the marathon where you can just have a mass start, we're limited by the number of boats we can put over the course. Same way Henley has a problem. They're side by side. So that's why they have 5 days of racing, because they're running from dawn till dark, 2 boats at a time. We don't own the riverbanks, unfortunately, so we have to squeeze it in. And our public safety bill is north of $250,000 US. So that's why we've cautiously dipped our toe into Friday morning. But it was great. I mean, I think we went to 2 days after we had this horrific storm in '96, and we lost everything. The worst day of my professional life, as I'm quoted as saying.
And so you would have done 4 years by that point in your role, and that would have been 91. Yeah, that would have been your 5th. Yeah, that's a massive blow.
I was pretty new in the job, so I was maybe a little more naive than I would be now about the weather. And I remember our presenting sponsor at the time was called Bay Bank. It was a local retail bank, and they were having a reception at a hotel in downtown Boston. And some TV crew showed up with a camera and lights, and they're, "Hey, Fred, can we talk to you for a minute? What do you think about this storm that's coming in tomorrow?" And I sort of went, "Storm? You mean, well, the weather's, they've always get it wrong. There's a fuzzy ball here and a fuzzy ball there, and maybe it'll rain." Well, did it rain? Oh my God. It was the 100-year storm. And so I was taken by surprise. We showed up the next morning at 5:00 to assess, what are the racing conditions. And the only thing we could do was start eliminating the schedule race by race and hope that it would clear. By about 10:30 or so, we called some of the local coaches together, legendary Harry Parker from Harvard, and we brought them into the hospitality tent near the boat club. And we said, "Well, we don't want to make this cancellation decision without your input. What do you think?" And they went, "I wouldn't put them out there." And so that was a done deal. By 11:00, we sent word down to Magazine Beach, which is where the shells used to launch from, and said, "We're sorry, but it's unrollable." Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just the volume of water coming.
I can tell you because I don't know, because we work with the Parks Department. They said there was 2 million gallons of water a minute being pumped out of the Charles River into the ocean, and it flooded the Green Line subway station along Boylston Street. So even the subway was closed; you couldn't run; it was flooded. So
yeah, that's absolutely intense. Yeah, well, at least it's clear cut,
Yeah, it was right. It wasn't like, "Oh, Fred, you should have."
Yeah.
I think I actually got in my car to go to work the next day and started weeping at the wheel and turned around and went home. I said, "I just can't even go to work." It's like, it was so bad. Because, we disappointed so many people. Think if you've come over from England or, wherever, and then no event. We couldn't do it on Monday because all the volunteers had to go back to work.
Yeah.
I only had one athlete send me his receipts for the weekend. I threw that one in the toss. Tossed that in the trash bin.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was a big blow, but it was the right thing to do. There was so much rain going sideways. It would have been unsafe. Yeah, really unsafe. Yeah. So, other changes, I don't know. Just developing the commercial side of it and making it more fun for the athletes and spectators on shore. I mean, that's our mission, is to serve the competitors, the spectators, the sponsors, and the community. And, in that order, we want to make sure everybody's, having a good time. And so, we've been able to build up sort of this retail presence, and that helps pay the bills. We had Brooks Brothers for many, many years, and they were a great partner. And then, Delta Airlines, we've had airline sponsors, car sponsors. Audi was a sponsor for many years. So you sort of cycle through these brands because marketing directors and marketing goals change. Yeah. So you're always having to. I mean, it took me 3 years just to get Brooks Brothers to be a sponsor because they gave up a golf tournament to do a rowing event.
Yeah.
So you have to be really persistent and keep going back and go to New York and say, "Hi, I'm here again. It's Fred." Remember? It's like, but fortunately, we have a really good product, and I think that's what makes it fun for me to be able to be passionate about something I've grown up with, and been able to, as I say, have a vocation that's also my avocation. And I've been sculling still. I'm still, in the Clydesdale division in my single, but, I picked my friends wisely in the 8 and we've managed to win our fair share of Masters events.
Very good. That's impressive stuff. I haven't yet got back out on the water. I'm still recovering.
Oh, you got to do it.
And what do you think is the appeal of Head of the Trials? Like, why is it so popular? What separates it from elsewhere?
I think it's, really, a well-oiled machine. I think the volunteers are so passionate and we have so much, intellectual, initiative here in Boston. Not to say it doesn't exist in other cities, but I think the venue with the river being so full of challenges with the turns and bridges, and then the college community. So there's over 120 colleges in Boston. So, not all of them have rowing, but, if you provide entertainment for people on a nice fall day, they're looking for something to do. Then they're going to go to Harvard Square and, take the green line or the red line and get down and watch some really world-class racing.
Absolutely, fair enough. In terms of tying in with the Boston Marathon, I thought that was quite interesting. Your links there, and is that how's that sort of relationship developed, I guess?
Well, we are on good terms with the marathon. My counterpart there, Tom Grilk, has been very helpful in some aspects, and they're much older than we are. They're over 100 years, and we kind of learn from lessons that they've learned and passed on to us. They're a different animal in some respects. They do have a deeper. Well, one advantage that I'm very jealous of is that they charge about $225 per single runner. Yeah. Whereas the Head of the Charles is around $55, $60 per seat. So they generate about $8 or $9 million in entry fees, right away, which is about half their budget. So they benefit from the ability to put 30,000 runners down the race course.
Yeah.
If I could put 30,000 rowers down the river, I could pay for the regatta.
Yeah, I see.
But I think it's great that Boston has these two historic, iconic events. I mean, Boston is a sports town, pure and simple. I mean, you think of all our professional teams, and even though Tom Brady moved on to Florida, there was a great matchup last Sunday, which you probably didn't hear either. Tom Brady and his Tampa Bay Buccaneers came back to Boston to play his old team, and it wasn't a very exciting game in my view. But it was the Buccaneers won. So, the quarterback who'd been with the Patriots for 20 years returned home.
The sport in America is it's massive, isn't it? And I was so surprised when I went to the Head of the Charles how there was like queuing, 10 deep to buy the different stuff and products all down the riverbank, and it's something that you'd never ever see in anywhere I'd ever gone, but particularly around GB. Like the Head of the River is our biggest, and there is a section on Putney Embankment, but not like the way you guys put it on.
I think we have a really good following. The youth events obviously bring parents and friends and club programs in are really they can have 100 to 150 youth rowers. So I think that helps, but I think just the crowds have come to gravitate down here. And I've rode in the head of the river a few years ago now. And like there's nobody watching.
Yeah.
It's like, it's more of a, you're self-challenged, There's some good beers at Putney, when you're done, but...
you were saying you're getting into the eights and into the singles. How many times do you race ahead of the trials?
Well, I don't have an exact count. I started because I went to Washington, so we didn't come here when I was an undergraduate. Okay. So my first time at the head of the trials was 1977, I think, and I rode a single, and then I was coaching, and then I really fell in with some really good mates. And we started rowing the 8 together. And our entry is called Team Adager, which is regatta spelled backwards. and so we have some luminaries, and then, we figured out that just like at the Heineken Regatta, you can age average. So we have a couple of younger guys who are our meat and potatoes, if you will. And then, if you have fit older guys, then you can generally do pretty well in your age class.
Very good.
So we've probably won it 12 or 13 times. It's been fun.
Solid effort. Because we're talking about rowing. So a question that Amanda is always asking, we're always asking at on the swing of things, is you've done your long training session in the 8 and you're coming into the dock. What's your favourite post rowing snack or meal?
Well, I think depending on the outcome of the race, or maybe there's probably no difference. It's probably you're looking for a cold beverage, and in our case, it would be a beer. So I think, it's a special moment because we only row together on once before the actual race because we don't all live in the same town. So we'll have people from Connecticut, and this year from Oregon, and this year from California. And so we blend, and because we're all such old dogs, we kind of know the same musical score. Yeah. So it's a time when, there's that's the beauty of rowing, right? You have this anxiety before the race, and you still have the butterflies, and like, especially at our age, at 70, you're going, what am I doing out here? Why did I sign up for this? And then once the starter says, okay, bring it up full power, then you get into the swing of things. And it's really hard, and but the reward is at the other end. And, we've won some and we've lost some, but I think it's the experience of being still in the game, and then being able to share that experience with people. And I, by way of example, I just wrote an email today to a good friend of mine in rowing, Igor Baraska. Mm-hmm. Igor is a longtime Croatian decorated Olympian, and a friend of mine from the University of Washington who also is an Olympian for the U.S., won a silver medal in L.A., is going on a bicycle trip from Dubrovnik to Split. And I said, well, you must meet my friend Igor. So I wrote an email yesterday to Igor saying, you must meet Charlie. And so the rowing community is worldwide. And it's so you make friends from all over the world. I didn't go to FISA Masters as many times as some of my friends, but it's a great community.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I think that's one of the things I missed actually leaving the international, racing scene was that boat park, that feel where you just see some familiar faces, and you don't always chat. Sometimes they're competitors, but there's always like a good respect and sort of rowing family thing.
That's right.
So that's cool.
Totally.
So that's probably one of the things that won't change. And another question I had was, what about the future? What are the plans for the future, the regatta, and maybe even like 30 years from now? What's your vision for it?
I would hope that the regatta will continue to grow in its ability to serve the competitors, but we've turned a page, and really we're excited about our becoming more involved with the community. I think in the past, the head of the trials was so focused on being the best regatta it could be that we missed some opportunities along the way to serve others around us in Boston and other communities. And so obviously the whole the States was impacted by the George Floyd tragedy, and DEI has become much more prominent. And the Regatta is very excited about a program we started last year with the Gold Cup in Philadelphia to give grants to rowers from emerging programs that primarily serve, Black and brown athletes. So last year we gave $100,000 to 7 programs. This year it's going to be $120 to another 6 or 7 programs, and we track them and we mentor them and make sure that they're spending it properly and looking over their shoulder and giving them counsel. So we're very proud of that work, and I think that's something that I think in the future, the Head of the Charles has just grown as a brand, and the expectations of the Head of the Charles are more far-reaching now than ever. So it's not just in our sport, but it's in our community.
Yeah, I can see that it you start to occupy a different space, perhaps than
Correct.
What it in its inception. So yeah, there's different responsibilities there. We talked a little bit around sponsorship, and I was just wondering if you felt like it was more difficult. I mean, I guess particularly now in the current economic climate off the back of COVID, it's going to be tougher.
No question. I mean, the Regatta is losing a lot of money this year just to operate. So we were not able to refill the sponsors that we lost. We had 5 or 6 premier, what we call sub-presenting sponsors. So BNY Mellon is our anchor, and they've been our presenting sponsor for 6 or 7 years now, and will be a couple more for sure. And then after that, it's a drop down, and with the Delta Airlines and the Fords and the Brooks Brothers. So yeah, I mean, I think COVID put the brakes on a lot of marketing budgets for this year, but we're hoping that it'll turn for 2022. And I think that's going to be the case, as some of the conversations that I've had with people. But I think in general, rowing is a tough sell because it's a smaller demographic. It's a high-end demographic, but it's not mass market. Mm-hmm. And there's so much competition for sponsorship dollars. You have to work like on a treadmill all day long. As I said, making these calls and trying to make connections. And sometimes you get a CEO with a rowing background, which certainly helps. And they feel a loyalty to rowing. But, even so, there's a value proposition that they have to sign off on, or their company's not going to spend the money more than once, So I think, rowing, I mean, certainly FISA, look at FISA. I mean, it's very difficult to come by major brand partners. And so, the Regatta, the Head of the Charles has been fortunate because we draw such a big audience. We'll have 150,000 people a day come down, and it's become an institution here. So, but it's still, we're in a town with 4 professional sports teams, who are, they're all knocking on the same doors. And so, we have to compete against the Celtics and the Patriots and the Red Sox and the Bruins. And then, people don't even think about how many nonprofits there are in Boston because there's, I think, about 250 nonprofits in Boston that are all looking for support for very worthy causes.
Yeah. It's you probably don't appreciate kind of who your competitors are in that sense. So yeah, is there anything I've missed, or we've covered it all? Are you happy? I'm
happy. Yeah, no, I thought the interview went very well, and hopefully it was entertaining. And
well, I was definitely entertained. I love I chew your ear off about the some of the great coaches as well. You obviously met like the Harry Parker and the likes of that, as Mike Sweeney.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point in my life, it's Steve Gladstone, coaches at Yale and is a legendary. There's a fun story there. Steve Gladstone and I both went to the same boarding school, the Kent School. And he learned to row there a generation or two before I did. I was about 9 years behind him. So I had a different coach than he did. But it was an indelible experience for both of us. And he went to University at Syracuse and then became a coach at Princeton University just as my father stepped out of coaching, Steve came in. So I knew Coach Gladstone as a young man, and he actually recommended that I go to Kent School, which I did. And then there is a trophy now named in honor of my father. It's called the Shock Cup, which is the race between Washington and California.
Oh, nice.
That was donated by Kent School. And so when Steve was coaching at Cal, he would always, with great pride, donate, or he would, hand over the winning crew, the Shock Cup, which had the California seal, the Washington seal, and the Kent School seal on it.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
So yeah, Steve and I are getting up there. I mean, he's got 10 years on me, but John Murphy at Brown is another longtime coach. I think he's 80 now. He's coaching the women at Brown. I think we're the oldest ones in the sport right now. It's like I could be missing somebody, but
did you ever think, if you'd stuck with the coaching, or not stuck with, but do you ever imagine down that life that you might have?
I do, and it's interesting because I a few years ago I had a chance to coach again up at because I have a home up in Hanover, New Hampshire, right on where Dartmouth College trains, and that's been the site of many national team training camp. And so Wyatt Allen, who is the head coach up there now, and Chris Kerber, who was from Cornell. Chris was my assistant at the head of the Charles. He's the lightweight guru at Cornell now. They asked me to help them coach the under-23 team.
Oh, cool. Oh, amazing.
So I coached the under-23 team, and then out of that, the next year, we coached the lightweight team. And I actually took a pair back to Bled, a lightweight pair. So I'm not done coaching yet. And I think, when I get a little more free time, and if I whittle down my hours here at the head of the Charles, I wouldn't bet against seeing Fred in a coaching launch again.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, and also you're definitely picking the nice venues. Bled is gorgeous. So if you're gonna, do a few internationals, they're the ones to go to.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Nice one. Well, thanks very much. It's been actually a pleasure chatting with you, Fred.
All right, good. Nice chatting.
Thanks very much.
Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to like, share, and follow from wherever you get your podcasts. Amanda will be somersaulting her way back for the next episode. It's a good one. Don't miss it. Thanks for joining us.